Anne Mahoney warns us, you worked a lifetime to save it. Don't lose it overnight. Forgery is the easiest, fastest, non-violent way to obtain millions quickly and hassle-free. 1 in 3 of us will be the victim of fraud. It might shock you to know that 99% of culprits include our family members, business associates, employees, caretakers, and friends. As many of us Golden Gate Breakfast Club members are part of the 77 million baby boomers, we comprise the largest pool of disposable income in history, and says that makes us prime targets. As you probably know by now, Anne Mahoney is a handwriting expert and certified forensic document examiner for both civil and criminal matters. The legal community, corporations, financial institutions, and private individuals hire Anne for her expertise and decades of experience. If I read you all her credentials and experience, you would never have time to hear her speak. Anne is an in-demand speaker. This is at least her 6th engagement for Golden Gate Breakfast Club. She's the author of Handwriting and Personality, has been a media personality, enjoyed amazing experiences, has collected the handwriting of many celebrities as well as hankies that are a part of history, and she's spoken about, I believe, 3 times to us, is one of my most fascinating friends and works tirelessly to see that our money stays where it belongs, in our pocket and not the bad guys, to discuss the silent thief stealing your future. Please welcome our good friend, Anne Mahoney.
Let me do a screen share and get set up here for you. Okay. Now, from beginning. Want to make sure you can see my screen.
Yes, I believe we see it.
Okay, so we know what we're going to talk about. And whether you're talking about a will, or you're buying a house, or maybe you're signing a commercial lease, anything to do with family, specifically elder care, you're signing a contract, those all relate to your handwriting. Now, before you do take a nap or fall face down into your cinnamon bun, the one point I want to make, if you get nothing else today, is as ubiquitous as e-signatures are, as automated as we've become, the more vulnerable you become to computer fraud. If they can hack the Pentagon, they can hack you. Your wet ink signature, which is what we call it, your wet ink signature becomes more valuable and more rare the more electronically we progress. So please, before we get into Adobe Sign and DocuSign, and that could take a whole hour unto itself, treasure that signature because we're relying on it more and more. So let me ask you a quick question. If we had a lot of people sign this person's name, how many different authors do you think we have here? We have script, we have printing, just at least 2, 3. How many different people worked on this handwriting and tried to sign this person's name? You can unmute yourself and answer.
1.
1? No. Look again. You've got printing, you've got script. I mean, you say the same person that did this G, did this G, the same person that did this forward slant, did this back slant. I think everybody's afraid to answer. Who answered one?
Me.
I would say two on that one.
Who's me? Who's me? I can't see anything but my screen.
I would say all of them.
You're absolutely right. It's one individual. Now, why is that important?
Thank you.
Because somebody brings to me a note left on their windshield that's done in block printing so the person can disguise their name. And then they bring me an addressed envelope to a Christmas card and say, I know it's him. See, compare the two. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you know how much handwriting I need to be able to determine who the writer was? You have to have adequate exemplars. So I've shown you many, many over the years, interesting cases. We're going to talk about some different things today. We will talk about documents where the handwriting was in question, but more importantly, we're going to talk about documents where the writing is genuine, but the document is false. And this is what I want you to pay attention to, because people are going to show you a document and you're going to say, well, yeah, that looks like my signature, but I don't remember signing that. I don't remember writing that. I don't know. And there's not a whole, so I'm going to tell you today to look beyond the handwriting. I look at barcodes, staple holes, ID codes, contested will, this you'll love. A last will and testament boilerplate form that's available at any stationery store contained a will dated June 19th, 2009. At the bottom of the page in microprint were the words Office Depot 2020. So somebody took a form from 2020 and backdated a will 11 years. And I said to them, you don't need me. Look at this little thing in the corner. How could you do a will in 2009 from paper that didn't even exist until 2020? So a lot of times it's the littlest, tiniest clue that you don't think about that can save you. Now, I've thought about this and I thought, you know, I don't want this to be an Anne Mahoney how to forge seminar either, because I'm giving you all these tips and tricks to avoid. And I don't know any other way to do that. But this is going to curl your hair. And my apologies to anybody who is in the insurance industry, but a client bought a policy in 2005 for $5,000 in coverage. Time came to redeem the policy and the insurance company claimed the correct policy amount was $3,500. Now, the client still had the original paperwork and the handwritten envelope from 2005 that stated the policy was $5,000. In the lower right-hand corner of the new policy was the code 212. That means the form was revised in 2012. Now remember, he bought the policy in 2005. How could a 2005 policy be printed on a form that didn't exist until 2012? The insurance company was pulling a scam. In addition, both policies contained images of the president's signature and the secretary's signature, and the company's secretary was a different one in 2005 to 2012. So we're not even talking about signatures here. We're talking about documents that have been changed, that have been altered. So I can't see you guys. So somebody, you know, I will look in the chat to say, you know, are you with me? Do you understand what I'm talking about? So do unmute yourselves, and I'm happy to hear somebody say, oh, I didn't know about that, or, oh, that's something I'm going to check into.
Oh,
So
I didn't know about that.
Let me give you one more. When we had our voter situation here, I got called in by the police department, and there was a woman who rents out her condo and she lives with her boyfriend at his place. She had a big, beautiful condo south of Market down by the ballpark in King Street. And she went ahead and still retrieved her mail at her condo. She didn't get a lot of mail. She got most of her mail at work, and she didn't want to be changing things and having her mail go to her boyfriend's place. Well, time came to vote and she didn't have a ballot. So she calls the registrar and they said, no, we have you recording as already have voted, because her ballot arrived and was taken by the tenant, and the tenant voted twice. He voted with her ballot and with his ballot. So law enforcement wanted me to look at the handwriting on the envelope. And I said, wait a minute, this envelope is still sealed. Why don't you test the ballot for fingerprints? If the envelope was still sealed, then the ballot would only contain the fingerprints of whoever used it to vote. And they said, oh, we didn't think about that. I actually am putting myself out of business by saying, and they did. They said, yeah, the tenant, we then hydrated for fingerprints. The owner of the condo was more than happy to give us her prints. Her prints weren't anywhere on the ballot, but the prints of her tenant were. So again, they wanted me to look at the handwriting on the ballot, but I look at everything. And I said, wait a minute, we can then hydrate this. So there's just some example. Sorry, was that a question? Okay. So a couple of things I want to cover early on because they're going to apply later, elder fraud. Now, with regard to a stroke, I'm going to show you my own mother's handwriting. So we can't say, well, Anne, you don't really know. You haven't seen my father's writing and it doesn't look that way. So here's my mother's writing before the stroke. So we go from May of 98 all the way to 2001. Here's the day after the stroke. She had to sign a lot of different forms at the hospital. Now, here's the mistake that people make. They think that with a stroke, your writing progressively deteriorates. So now mom or dad have retired to Florida, Arizona, Texas, California, Oregon. The kids live back east, live in the Midwest. And suddenly, after mom has this stroke or dad has this stroke, a couple weeks later, they decide they want to change things and they change their will or they change their trust. And the kids who live back east say, Dad couldn't sign this. Dad had a stroke. When I saw him in the hospital, he couldn't sign. You've made this up. This is a forge. Okay, now I want to show you something. Does handwriting deteriorate after a stroke? Well, here's 6 weeks after the stroke. So let's take a look again. Here's before the stroke. Here's the day after the stroke. And here's 6 weeks later. So can it come back? It can come back. What you want to be careful of. Now, I can't see the bottom of my screen. Can you see? Are you looking at all these icons or can you see the writing?
We can see the writing.
You can see where it says note the spelling.
Yes.
Okay, you see how it says instead of Mahoney, it says M-A-S-H-O-N-Y. Again, the kids will go, why, a caregiver did that. They don't even know how to spell her name. They spelled it wrong. Or you can look here, this looks like this is M-A-H-O-N-Y, but it looks like M-A-S-O-N-Y. I was there. By the way, she's clear as a bell. She could tell you within $50 what her total net worth is. She can read the Wall Street Journal, but this is what her handwriting looks like now. This is how she's signing. So this is where kids get into big fights with one another, where one kid said, Dad absolutely did not sign that. And the other kid said, but you don't know what you're talking about. And of course, she was at a classic residence by Hyatt, and all she has to really do, all they require is that the person can draw an X, because you saw her writing the day after the stroke. And in order to get back into, she was in the hospital, in order to get back into the care center where she lived, she had to be able to sign those papers. So those are what those signatures look like. I'm sorry if I'm turning my head to look at these two different screens. So I hope you're getting my voice okay. So all of you property owners here, this is a landlord, an elderly person, and somebody changed the lease. So let's take a look at these. Now you put the writing in chronological order. This is the one that's in question. It's too smooth. It's too clean. She didn't have the neuromuscular capability. It's a good job. It looks, all the letter forms are there, but you can see how this one stands out like a sore thumb, right? Can this be her writing and this be her writing? Now, I had probably 30 different exhibits that went with this, but I'm just going to show you one. When she writes the binder, B-I, she goes from it's connected. The B is connected to the next letter. This is all genuine. This is the question. The person stopped the pen here, picked up the pen, and put it down again to join the next letter. They aren't paying it. They're just making sure they get all the letters in. They're not paying attention to how a person connects their letters or how they put the name together. So, and there are many, many more, but I mean, I could go on all day just on one case. But I do need some feedback to let me know that people are still there.
We're
Well, I
here.
think-
This is
Yes, we're
fascinating.
here. We're
Okay,
here.
here.
so
Yeah.
We're
here,
here. Fascinating.
okay, this is forged. This is the lease. I love this amendment to the lease. Any of you that ever have been a landlord, what landlord is going to say the tenants currently have 5 cats, Daniel, Charlie, Penny, Naomi, Leah. There's no additional deposit required for any of these pets. Yeah, right. She really signed that. Are you kidding me? So this is all forged. Now, just so you have an idea, these are how many signatures I looked at. And you can see that it gets progressively a little shakier. But one thing you might be surprised at, and this is why this work is so hard, these were both signed on the same day. These are both genuine signatures signed on the same day. So you can see when we get to wills and trusts and things like that, how it, and or you know, a caregiver and checks that are signed, if they're writing this way on one check and they're writing this, these are all genuine, these are both genuine signatures. It's very tough work. You've got to take care of yourself and make sure that you can make that signature as legible as possible. This one I love. I've shown you this before. A residence with no more than 2 adults. Well, why don't we just, let's make it 3. Let's make it 3 adults. And you know, let's add a few other things. Permission to garden in the backyard granted. None of that was on the original lease. They dug a koi pond in the backyard. They added a yurt. They had a subtenant living in the backyard. I mean, so you want to be really good with your records and keep your version of the contract when they show up with their version of the contract. This one, it may be difficult to see, but I have to show it to you. There are 5 different inks on this contract. Now, this was a guy who himself owned property, and he was renting a place from a woman, and this is an option to renew the lease for 25 years at no more than 4% increase at $2,000. And I'm going to show you where the property is. It's unbelievable, but I'm going to show you this up close. This is one ink. This is another ink. This is another. And he said, well, we're such good friends. I've been a tenant for so long. We went to the bodega and sat down at the table there, the little round table. It wasn't a lot of room to write. And we just hammered it out and agreed to it. I feel like this 25. How many years is it for? Who signs a lease for 25 years? And if you put it under infrared, one of the inks even disappears. I mean, it's so obvious. Okay, here's a document backdated 8 months. Why am I showing you this? This is notarized. The judge, listen to me, the judge could not decide if this document had been altered. Excuse me, because she passed away and these 2 guys bought the building, and then the tenant shows up with this. Unbelievable. And Fripp, this is in your neighborhood. This bodega did sandwiches and drinks. It's right to the entrance to Golden Gate Park, and they made a fortune there. Of course they'd want to lease for 25 years. Everybody stopped there to get lunch before they went in and had their picnic. And the judge couldn't decide. I won't even tell you how this thing turned out. I mean, and the guy that faked this whole document, every time they'd start asking, I was in court, every time they'd start asking a tough question, he'd have heart palpitations, and he'd have to sit down, and they'd have to stop the proceeding. I mean, it was unbelievable, unbelievable. And you think, oh, nobody could ever get away with that. Yeah, they do. I look at it and go, you've got to be kidding me. And then the judge can't decide. You really got to be kidding me. Now this one, you see things for the foundation, the framing, the second floor framing, the siding, the rough electrical. And this could be all completely legit. You're working with your contractor. Okay, I wrote the check 1087 for $1,000 and here are my initials and here's when I wrote it. But how easy would this be to just add a few things at a later date and say, no, I paid you for that. Remember, I such and such and such. So you're riding on the hood of a Ford truck with a big convex bumper. It's too tall a surface for you to write on. It's a curved surface. It's really difficult. What do you do when you have things like this? Now, I realize I'm stating the obvious, but sometimes you forget when you're out in the field or you're working on your house. Even if you sign or initial all the changes, don't forget. Take a photo with your phone of any additions or alterations and send the other person a copy of the photo before you leave the premises. Yes, this is what we agreed to. This is because see, these initials here are in a completely different ink than to, here's an extra 1,000, here's an extra 4,000. Take a pic. If you want to go back and retype it up later, fine, but take a picture and send it to the guy. So he's real clear. I've documented this as of this time and I've sent it to you. Don't forget how important your phone is for anything that you're signing or working with. If you get nothing else today, get that. There's a lot of landlord tenant stuff, as you can imagine, going on in San Francisco. Now, okay, let me tell you about this case. I'm going to show you exhibits. You're going to say, oh, that's too much information. I can't take it in. What you do is too complex. You don't have to understand the slides I'm showing you. I'm only showing you to let you know the work was done. All you have to do is listen to me and listen to what the story is, which could apply to you. So Mr. Crawford submits a contract that he claimed was signed by Mr. MacArthur. But Mr. MacArthur says, but I didn't sign that. Yeah, it looks like my signature. Get this, it looks like my signature, but I didn't sign that. Well, what happened was, here's the contract that's submitted by Crawford. And he says, no, you signed it right there. It's sort of fuzzy and out of focus. And it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. Well, what happened? MacArthur was traveling on business and he was at a Marriott in Virginia. He did read the contract that was faxed to him. He discussed his concerns, but he didn't sign it. Now, 10 years later, he produces the unsigned copy, which he says, this is the contract. So here's the contract that he produces. It's got the fax imprint on it. It's nice and clear. You can read everything. He said, I didn't sign it because I had problems with some of the clauses in the contract. So I faxed him back and I told him, here are the issues that I have with this. We even have the fax imprint and the date. I know it looks fuzzy. I don't expect you to be able to see it. I just want you to know he saved everything. Now, here's the one that they're saying is genuine. And he's saying, no, mine is genuine. You don't have to get what all this is. You don't have to read all this. First, all I'm saying is I take the two contracts and I get them to be the same size because one was reduced, one was smaller. Once they're the same size, I start comparing and I say, okay. In one of them, the buyer's signature line is shorter than the seller's. In the other one, all three lines are the same length. Now that may sound silly, but I'm looking for whatever differences I can find. Okay, so I'll take away the signatures so it's easier for you to see. So in the known, where there was no signature on the line, here's the length of the line, here's the length of the other two. In the question, what happened was because they tried to make it perfect, they made all the lines the same length. That wasn't real. This is fake in the question. They made the line too long. Now, why is it important that I'm looking at the lines? Well, you'll find out in a minute. It looks like this is really picayune. Then I looked at the spaces between the lines. And remember now, these are both the same size. One isn't reduced and those aren't right either. Again, you don't need to know all the details. They just know that I'm looking at all the details and it doesn't work. Then you look at something like this. When you're putting a seller, you want a signature, you hit underline. So there's a step down. But when you look here in the known, it's absolutely on the same line. Now there's a step down with the seller and a step down here because these are genuine, but this where it was forged, where I'll just tell you what happened. He cut and pasted a signature. He tried to make it look perfect and he made it too perfect. Remember, he made it too long. He made it too straight. There's no step down. It's just, he tried too hard to make it too perfect. We know the question signature is a cut and paste. The line length is wrong. The line spacing is wrong. The line placement is wrong. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. But it's those little tiny details that I have to point out. Now, could we ever figure out where he got that signature? Well, that never happens. But as a matter of fact, we went to the South Carolina records. Now, any of you in real estate, or any of you who bought real estate, these are all the documents signed by Stephen McCarthy. So I went through every single one. I went through the signatures and guess what I found? I found the source where he cut and pasted that signature. It was a mortgage. And here's the signature he stole from this mortgage online and cut and pasted that signature into this contract. Could this happen to you? Is your signature online? You bet it is. So here it is. Now notice, this is the one, he found one that was pretty clean and it only overlapped on the word borrower. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the signature. Here's the known from the mortgage from 2018. Here's the document from 2009 where he cut and pasted it and then made a copy of a copy of a copy so he could hide his mistakes. So here's the one he took off the web. You overlay it to the one, you can see where he had to make some changes. And so not only did we find the source, pretty hard to take a signature from 2018 and put it on a document from 2009. But the thing to remember is, oh, well, okay, just you actually, you don't need this, but just again, so you can see. These are all, I had to look at all these different signatures to get his style. To get the point is we could look at 50, 60 signatures. You're never going to find two that are exactly the same. The closest one I could find is this one. And you can see it's different in the A, it's different in the loop of the T. So we're showing the court, you're never going to find two that are exactly like this unless one is lifted from another document and they've been traced. Everything is important from just the length of the lines. Even if we had never found that signature, we could prove our case from the placement of the line, the length of the line, the step down. So it's little tiny things that happen. Contracts, this you're gonna love. And some of you may have seen this. Mr. Kim says Miss Lee brought him a document and this was the contract. Whatever it said, this was the contract. And then she drew a line, wrote my name and asked me to sign it. So I signed it. Hang on, I got to get my, then what she did was she cut the paper in half and got rid of the contract that he signed. And she wrote a new contract and the bottom half of the paper above his signature. Now it's all black ballpoint pen. So he brings in this 8.5 by 5 document and says, or she brings it in, he says, yes, that's my signature, but that's not the contract that I signed. Pretty wild. This all has to do with stock purchases. And the poor guy's got his signature in black ballpoint. This is on the original. This is what she added. So what we're going to do, we're going to take an infrared camera and we're going to look at the signature, which he did that same day. And we're going to look at something that he says was added later. And you don't have to understand all this, but the point is, here's the part that she added. Here's his original signature. When you look at it under infrared, they luminesce differently. The signature disappears. The original signature disappears. But the contract that she added, the information is still there. Now, if I hadn't had the original, I could not have done this. So again, here's the original. Here's what she added. Now, why am I showing you this except for the fact that it's pretty fascinating? A decade later, I get a phone call from an attorney that says, did you work on that case? And I said, yes. A private, quiet gentleman ran a machinist shop with his son and only heir. He invested in rental properties over the years, and his estate is now worth $10 million. Miss Lee marries this guy in January, takes him to the attorney in February, creates a new will, leaving the entire $10 million estate to her. And by March, he's dead. And yes, the will is in question. Well, I can't wait to see the will. But he said, no, I didn't know about you then. I hired another document examiner and they're going to prove that the will is false. The reason I'm bringing you in is because I looked in the records to say, was she ever involved in any other lawsuits? And I found all of your exhibits and your report from the cut document, the contract that was cut in half. I want you to testify to the fact and show that that was 10 years ago, that she has this habit pattern of fabricating and changing documents. And I don't really want you testifying about the will. We can have you come in, but I want multiple document examiners showing multiple documents that he's forged. How do you like them apples? I mean, she marries him in January and by March, the guy is gone because she got what she needed and she moved on. Now, this one is, I want you to check out this one because this could happen to any of us. Mr. Hutchison dies and he leaves this $3 million Santa Barbara home with an ocean view to his niece. And a couple of years later, the niece has a couple of kids to put through college and she decides to sell the property. Ready to go. She's got, well, all of a sudden the neighbor, Joe, who resides uphill, produces this easement saying, you can sell that house, but you can never block my view. So how do you think that's going to go with the sale of the home? They had a movie producer who was in Africa who was ready to pay all cash, ready to buy the home. And then the neighbor shows up with this easement. So they show, okay, so here's the home. Here's downhill and here's the ocean. I mean, it had this incredible, incredible piece of property. So here's the property. It's an old house. The property goes all the way down here. This is another building site. There's nothing on this side of them, nothing on this side of them. Here's the neighbor behind who says, if somebody buys this, they'll probably tear it down and build some big monster home and it's going to block my view. Well, I can't have that. Notice they share the same driveway and everything. So they want me to look at the easement and say, did Mr. Hutchison sign this easement? Well, I found out, indeed, he did. Okay. View easement is binding on my property to be honored to any successor, including any future owner. You can't preserve my view of the pool, my kitchen balcony, my upper balconies. And I said, and they gave me lots of samples of his handwriting. And they said, is this his signature? And I said, oh, okay. So anyway, Joe says he created the easement and then he returned the draft to Joe and Joe made corrections, although he misspelled Hutchison's name. And then I returned it to him and he signed it and he kept the original. I don't have the original anymore. So I look at all the different signatures and I said, yes, the signature is genuine. However, the document is phony. What had happened is he scanned a signature and put it on the documents. And the way I tried to show them that was, I went ahead. Oh, so when we said he scanned it, Joe said, oh yeah, you know, back in 2013, and you don't need to know all this history, I digitized everything, I scanned everything, but you can look for the attachment to the emails I sent the niece. He never sent the niece any emails. And I'll get you the JPEG, there was no JPEG. So here's the document. I scanned the entire document and I showed that this was scanned, but the scanning also shows up on the copy. You're not just going to have scanning on the signature, you're going to have scanning on the whole document, right? So here's what he provided, here's what Joe provided, and here's what I provided. You see how this is a scan. It may be harder to see, it's very well done, but this is pure black solid ink. It's not scanned. If you really scan the whole document, everything would look like it's scanned. I've enlarged it as much as I can. Can you see the difference? Just shout out if you can. The difference between what Joe
Yes.
provided.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So then we enhanced it further, and you see a cut line here and a little corner up here where it's been cut and pasted. You can actually see that. And when you enhance it even further, these are the lines that show up.
Oh my.
So actually, when you're looking at this easement, it looks like this when you really, really enhance it. Yes, the printing gets thick and gets dark and it's harder to read. But now this is, can you see what I'm talking about? It was off a Christmas card. Now, you don't need to know all this. These are all the different things we did. We consulted 2 digital forensic experts. They said, we'll need to see the computer in order to read the metadata. We tried to do all kinds of things. And this is what's important but embarrassing. The client's daughter enhanced the image on her iPhone. And that's how we got the cut lines. Her 15-year-old daughter was able to do more than any of the digital experts or that I could do. So you got to have a kid. If you didn't have a kid, go adopt one, because you got to have somebody who can do. Isn't that? I mean, that's pretty darn fascinating, I think. Now, this is a situation where the plaintiff is a restaurateur in, how am I doing on time? Okay. How much time do I have left?
You're 5 or 35, 36 minutes, something like that. So you've got to, however you want to go. We got
Oh, so I got to hurry up. Okay. So she had a restaurant, and a Chinese restaurant. It was very, very, very successful. The landlord decides, I don't want to leave this tenant doing that. The landlord decides they want the restaurant. So they bring in this lease, and I never saw the original till we're in court. And it's the plaintiff's signature on the last page, but the top page has been changed. She had $12,000 in a security deposit, and this new lease reads that she has 0 in a security deposit. So the way we were able to do this case was, I brought in ultraviolet light, and we had like a hood. You go under a black velvet hood, and we just got lucky because everything looked exactly the same, and it was a good signature. So we put the ultraviolet light on, and page 1 was a different color of white. It had more whitening in it. It had more clay content. It shone like a star in the sky. So we showed that page 1 was not the same as all the other pages. So that's how we were able to do that. The thing I think is pretty interesting is, so we showed it was a page substitution. These are all the different versions of her lease, which I won't get into, but here she has 0 on deposit. She has 12,000 on deposit. There are many, many, many leases, and they'll just change the page they need to change. Now, what's interesting is, I'm sure the landlord is sorry they ever did this. She's showing all the rent that she paid over the years. She requested a receipt, and she paid in cash. The landlord wanted it in cash and never gave her a receipt. And this went on and on and on. She showed records for years, but I'll show you a cumulative record. She paid over $1 million in rent over the, can you say IRS? All of these records are now in the court on file of what the tenant says. I paid her this in cash, and I paid her. I bet the landlord is sorry they ever opened this can of worms ever. So can I show you one last one if I go fast?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, a woman lives in a gated community, safe, secure, beautiful gardens, a pool. She's coming out to go to work, and there's a note on her windshield, and the note says, "You're the most beautiful lady I've ever seen. I wait for you every day." Now she's in a gated community. "You are so gorgeous. Don't believe me? Just watch." Any woman on this phone call right now, her blood ran cold, didn't it, ladies? Just watch? Just watch for what? So this happens to be the handwriting of a person who's the caretaker and who takes care of the pool and the grounds. And they said, and there are more samples of his writing. Well, this wasn't even his writing, so you have to be careful what they give you. So okay, so there's a very unique E. Look at this E that looks like an L with a C. And this person does the same thing. I put the words down here because otherwise, like, look at this. You might go, that isn't an E. Yes, it is. It's in the word the. And who's going to know all the different variations of how the person makes the E except the actual writer? Here's an F for the word of. Affairs, feedback. Here's an O that is made in a clockwise fashion. It's very interesting. See the word you, and then see the word about or round or your. And if you blow it up to where he gets to the point where he says you're gorgeous, you have that same formation. Gorgeous, about. It's all printed in caps, but not for the J. There's a descender on that J. And the S looks like a figure 8 that's connected at the bottom that goes right into the next letter. And the G, I mean, I know we're running out of time, so I got to go fast. Now you could say, but these don't look the same. Now I've got to get a jury to understand what I'm talking about. So I say, look, this is John Wayne in black tie on the red carpet going to the Academy Awards. This is John Wayne on the left-hand side. This is John Wayne all dressed up. This is John Wayne dusty, dirty, in blue jeans, getting off his horse. Externally, they don't look the same, but there's the same gait to his walk, the same speed to his talk. Hey, howdy, Pilgrim. The same shirt size, the same shoe size, the same eye color. The internals, which I just showed you, the E, the G, the internals are consistent regardless of how it's dressed up on the outside to look like it's in black tie or it's in blue jeans. So those are the kind of stories, as Patricia will tell you, you've got to have a story. I have to come up with stories for all of these things for the jury to remember. I won't even, anyway, I do this to attorneys to give them a hard time. They say, there is a shop in Visalia that makes signs and it says high quality, fast turnaround, low price, pick any two. Because if you want high quality and low price, you're not going to have a fast turnaround. It's going to take some time. Do we have any questions? I think I'm going too long here. Sorry.
Any questions?
Well, and this is so fascinating, and I love the John Wayne. This is John Wayne, but the two sides. That this is so, well, listening to it, you have to be so smart to do this.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's scary. I'll give you another story just that works with a jury that goes for disguised handwriting. Let's say I'm asking you to pick up my brother at the airport, and he's 6'4" and he weighs 190 pounds, and he has brown hair and blue eyes. And you go to the gate, and the only guy that's 6'4" that gets off the plane weighs 300 pounds, and his head is shaved. Is that my brother? Oh, forgot to tell you, he has a tattoo on his left hand that says Mom. And here's a picture of the tattoo. And it's exactly the same, even though he's a larger guy and he disguised himself in his writing or his demeanor, it's the same tattoo. That E that you saw, that O that you saw, those are tattoos. It doesn't matter what it looks like externally if the guy is 300 pounds or 180 pounds, if he has a big thick head of hair or if he shaved his head. There are internal consistencies like a tattoo that you can't hide, that don't change. And that story, because the one time I did a case and I'm in the car driving home from court and the attorney calls, he goes, the jury's already back and they've made their decision. And they kept saying, but writing has the tattoo, it has the tattoo. They remembered the story.
Yeah, I have a question. You know, being a CPA, we paid some bills, and one of the people, the recipient, one of the partners, forged this signature on the check, and the bank honored it. And we went back and said, that's not even his signature, and he's not even on the signature card. And the bank just said, that's tough luck. We still honor the check. I don't know how you can, you know, honor that.
If I were to tell you, well, we're taping this, so I'll answer that another time, but banks write off enormous amounts of losses
You know,
with regard to checks. So I got to be careful what I say. Yeah.
yeah. Anne, can you take the your slide off screen? I can't see you and I want to see you.
Stop
Okay.
sharing, stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
There we go. Okay, and I have a question because so much of this has to do with signature, etc. And yet they are not teaching cursive in schools to kids. What is going to happen?
Oh, yeah. And I have no beef with DocuSign. I have a whole, if what's going to happen is everything's going to be electronic pretty soon. Right now, you have to have a wedding signature on your will. And you used to have a wedding signature on papers that had to do with family law, with adoption or child custody. An attorney in Marin told me as of 2021, she's a family law attorney, she can file papers with regard to child custody or adoption that are just electronic signatures. They're not even requiring wet signatures anymore. Now, here's the problem, because I could tell you DocuSign stories for days, but mom gets Parkinson's, mom gets arthritis, mom is unable to sign anymore. And the son, when I say son, he could be 60, 65 years old, says, don't worry, mom, there's this great electronic program and I'll set it up for you. I'll set it up for you. So he knows the password, he knows everything, and he starts transferring her rental properties to himself with electronic signatures. And that's another whole presentation for another time. But kids today literally buy a house signing on an iPad with their finger. I mean, you can't even see what the thing is. And I keep, if I tell you nothing else today, please sign every page, sign and date every page. I had one estate planning attorney who is, 35 or 40, she's in her prime, and she goes, I'm not going to have my clients do this, so to avoid slip sheeting, right? So to avoid page substitution, like you saw with the lease with the Chinese restaurant. And she says, some of the contracts I do or documents I do are 80 pages long. I said, so you've built an 80-room mansion and you've left the front door wide open. I said, you put everything you own, you put in that mansion, your real estate, your stocks, your bonds, and you've left the front door wide open. I said, go to the local deli and pick 2 sandwiches and 2 salads and make up a little menu. And if you see that somebody's handwriting is, invite them in to come sit in your office at no charge to them and sign every page of their will. And if they want to come in 5 years later and you want to keep the same will, turn the page over. And we've got an old signature on the front and new signatures on the back. And I said, you have them sign every page. Not only that, you have them in your office to ask them, are there any changes you want to make? Is there anything you'd like? And it doesn't have to be the attorney. You can be somebody's broker. You can be their banker. And I made up a card for this one guy that said, at the beginning of the year, instead of a Christmas card, they sent a card, a signature card, and said, over the years, our writing can change. It happens to anyone. We'd love to keep your file updated. Could you just please sign here? And they write a sentence. This is a sentence. This is my current handwriting. And they sign it and they date it. And of course, there's a self-addressed stamped envelope and they send it back. So you've got something on file, because I had a situation where a guy died. He was Mr. Big Shot, always too busy to sign. His wife paid all the bills and signed all the checks, and yes, signed his name. His secretary signed everything at work. We didn't have any genuine samples of his writing to compare. And the wife brought in a will, the girlfriend brought in a will, and the son brought in a will. And how am I supposed to, and you want me to determine? You don't want me to determine what happens to your financial future or who gets your assets. Stop letting people sign for you. And then the attorney finally acquiesces and says, okay, fine, I'll have them initial every page. Don't waste my time. People initial differently than they sign. The only time I even get samples of initials are like if you go to rent a car at the airport when you're on vacation and they have you initial here, initial here, initial here. Don't get lazy. The old saying is, don't step over $100 bill to pick up a dime. Sit down and sign your name and date every single page of your will. And I know you don't have to sign your trust. You sign every page of your trust so that nobody can substitute a page and say, you know, that house in Tahoe that I was leaving to my son, I've decided to leave it to my faithful executor. Well, it's your signature at the end of the will, but what happened on page 5 to the house in Tahoe? Because the page got substituted. I feel like I'm rushing and going too fast because I don't want to
you're
hold you
fine.
too long and run out of time. But does everybody understand what I'm talking about? And the guy that did my will, when I wanted to make a change to my will, and I said, I'll come in and sign a new one, he said, don't worry, we can make the change and we have your scanned copy on file. I said, if you don't have my wet signature on file, you are not my attorney.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to pay to warehouse this stuff. They can just scan it and, you know, it's on a CD and everything's there. But it's your future. You just saw with Ron Hutchins, there's a scanned signature that goes on this real estate document. That's the view easement. Please, guys, help me help you. I do have that whole thing with you know, Tom Cruise is to help me help you. But your wet signature, can you see how it's going to become more and more and more important when a guy looks at a contract that was faxed to him at the Marriott in 2009 and goes, it looks like my signature. Well, it was taken off a mortgage that he signed in 2018. How scary is that? And if they hadn't gotten the length of the lines wrong, if I hadn't looked at every little detail, we never could. I mean, don't think that we're going to find the source document. I showed you that, but that's like a needle in 10 haystacks to find the signature that it came from. But anything that you've signed in real estate, yeah, copies are online. Yeah, I can lift your signature and go put it somewhere else. And I have Craig Adams, I emailed him a tip sheet. We were talking earlier this morning and I didn't know how to do it. So Craig was nice enough to say, just send it to me. I have a tip sheet for you of 10 tips to protect yourself. And did you get it, Craig? I've emailed it to Craig and he's
Let
going
me
to
check. I was so fascinated by your presentation, I wasn't looking at anything else. I mean,
I'll
that
put it
was
in the bulletin
amazing.
too. That should go in the bulletin as well.
Oh, well, that's up to Antonio.
Yes, I do have the handout. So, yeah, I can forward this to Antonio
Well,
right
here's
now.
the thing I want to, let me just say, I so wanted to see Antonio's presentation on artificial intelligence. And if artificial intelligence can translate 100 languages and write music and write poetry, you don't think it could write a will or a trust in your name and put your assets in and add an electronic signature? It could do it in a matter of seconds. So, I mean, it's a brave new ugly world out there. And I just want you to see what's going on.
Hi, Ann. Bill Buchanan. Welcome back to the Breakfast Club. I always feel like, you know, I've eaten a quarter of the meal and then somebody takes the plate away when you're doing these presentations. Quick question for you. I'm seeing quite a few ads on TV or, you know, where else, about the possibility that somebody can steal the title to your house. Have you had any cases referred to you, you know, in that genre? I don't understand how that could be, except that they have an assessor's office statement that says, well, we're just there at the window. Whatever you bring in, we just stamp it. We don't look at the signature or anything like that.
Well, it's true.
that-
It's true, they don't, but no, I haven't been brought in on those, but maybe that's because they're still in the real estate attorney's office. The things I get with real estate is family stealing from family.
Yeah.
I will tell you a good one, though. I had a family that owned a lot of property, strip shopping centers, apartment buildings, whatever. Old Italian family, 5 kids, 4 daughters, 1 son. So they put the mom and dad put the son in charge because the man should be in charge. And he was siphoning off. He'd like take the anchor tenant to the strip mall, like the Best Buy, and he'd transfer that property and the lease to himself and these other different trusts that he was doing. I had 146 notarized signatures. So all of you listening go, well, I don't have to worry because it's been notarized. They were all forged. His secretary, who didn't want to lose her job, was notarizing these things. The son was signing the mom's name. So when I show you things like, oh, it was based on just the length of the line, I look at every detail. So I asked, and plus mom had done calligraphy. She had 3 different styles of signing, but I asked to see her medical records. And so when we get it, and I was in the deposition, which often doesn't happen. And so the attorney was Columboing it and pretending like he didn't know. He goes, well, let's take like September 14th here, where mom transferred the Best Buy to you. Tell us about that. How did that happen? Well, she came in and we went out to lunch and and she said, you've been doing such a great job with my property. Well, that particular day, and suddenly the attorney comes up with the medical records. Mom was under general anesthetic having bladder surgery. But first we got the son on the record to say that he and mom had gone out to lunch and mom had, and the other thing is there were fingerprints in the journal, in the notary. So you'd think every single time it was mom's thumbprint or fingerprint, it was smeared every single time. And I'm talking hundreds of, so he turned white. His attorney stood up and said, this deposition is over right now. And out they went, because pretty hard to give your son a piece of property when you're under general anesthetic. Again, we just got lucky there, but if you turn over every stone, you're gonna find the beetle under one of those stones that's eating away at the real estate empire. So I'm sorry, I could tell you stories all day, and I know we have to go. I understand.
Thank you, Ann. Great position.
And I have an